What good is an explanation if the machine still fails? If you can describe the sound, name the warning, trace the pattern, identify the wound, explain the origin, and tell the whole story beautifully, but the machine still breaks, and what did the explanation actually repair? Can a man explain the signal without answering it? Can he describe the warning light so well that he never fixes the system? Can he name the wound so accurately that he forgets the wound is not supposed to be in charge? And what happens when the boy can explain the pain, but the man still will not govern the machine? That's our question today. Not whether the explanation is real, it might be real. Not whether the wound is real, it probably is. Not whether the boy has a story, he does. The question is whether the man can govern the machine before the wheels fall off. A motorcycle will usually tell you before it fails. It clicks different, pulls different, vibrates different, the clutch feels off, the throttle response changes. The brakes start talking. Maybe it runs hot. Maybe it smells wrong. Maybe the idle changes. Maybe takeoff from the red light feels a little slower than it should. Maybe there's a tick that wasn't there before. The machine gives you signals before it breaks. And if you know the machine, then you do not need perfect diagnosis to know something is off. You may not know exactly what part is failing. You may not know whether it is serious yet. You might not know if it's going to be expensive. You might not know whether you can fix it yourself, but you know enough to stop pretending you didn't hear it. And this is where men get into trouble, because a man who is committed to his explanation can ignore every signal in front of him. He can say, "I'll get to it." And sometimes what he means is, "I hope I never have to address this." That is what "I'll get to it" often means. It sounds responsible. It sounds like a plan. It sounds like timing. It sounds like adult prioritization. But sometimes it's just a prayer that consequence stays patient. And consequence is not always patient. The machine doesn't care how well you explain the sound. It either gets corrected or it fails. This is Reforged. Ignore the anecdotes. If you keep listening to Reforged, you are going to hear certain things more than once. Formation, obedience, cost, correction, evidence, responsibility, agency, governance. That is intentional. Not because we're out of things to say, because some things are load-bearing. Repetition formed the old pattern. Repeated appetite, repeated resentment, repeated silence, repeated shame, repeated refusal to correct, repeated obedience to the thing that was shrinking you. So yes, Reforged repeats standards. Not the whole argument, not the whole episode, the standard. Because a man does not become different because he heard one clean sentence and nodded at it. Formation happens when the standard keeps meeting him where he tries to escape it. So here's the standard again. How did this form you? Why do you still obey it? What does it cost you? Who else paid for it? What evidence shows that you are changing? What are you responsible for now? And today, we're going to ask that through the machine. The last episode was the boy and the man. This episode is the man and the machine. Not because the boy can explain a lot. The boy can explain the pain. The boy can explain the grief. The boy can explain the abandonment, the longing, the humiliation, the hunger. The boy can explain the parts of him that reached for something and got told no. The boy can explain the parts of him that never got held correctly, corrected correctly, protected, or prepared correctly. But the man has to decide what all of that becomes. Pain does not stay neutral. Grief does not stay neutral. Longing, humiliation, abandonment, none of that stay neutral. It's all energy. All of that is fuel. And it is going to become something. And if the man does not govern it, it will still become something. It will just become something unchosen, resentment, lust, control, cruelty, collapse, performance, a speech, a story he keeps telling while the machine keeps making the same sound. I cannot go back and protect that boy from what happened to him. I cannot reverse the passage of time. Nobody's figured out how to do that, and I am not going to waste my life trying. But I can protect him from wrecking the whole plot. Are you here? Because that's the bridge. The boy can explain the pain. The man has to take control. Explanation says, this is why the boy hurts. A correction says, the boy does not get to drive. There was a version of you before the world taught you what to hide, before shame had a name, before performance became instinct, before appetite got dressed up as freedom, before you learned to numb yourself, before you learned to defend yourself, before you learned to disappear inside your own body, before you learned how to call the old pattern your personality. Some of us barely remember that version. Some of us do not remember him at all. Some of us were exposed to things before we had language, before we had defense, before we had choice, before we had any real ability to look at what was happening and say, no, this is not for me. This should not be here. I am not ready for this. And when something gets in early enough, it doesn't feel like an event. It feels like reality. It feels like the world. It feels like you. And that's the danger, because a man can go his whole life mistaking what happened to him for who he is. He can confuse exposure with desire, damage with identity, appetite with freedom, impulse with truth, survival patterns with personality. And brother, I understand that more than I wish I did. I understand what it is to have things planted early. I understand what it is to be shaped by something you did not ask for. And I understand what it is to carry an appetite so long you almost stopped questioning whether it belongs to you. I understand what it is to look at an old pattern and say, damn, has this really been running me that long? This is where a lot of men lose the plot. Because once they find the explanation, they try to turn it into permission. They say, well, this happened to me. I was raised this way. Nobody taught me. I was exposed too early. I was hurt. I was abandoned. I was just surviving. And maybe every single word of that is true. Maybe the explanation is real. The wound is real. Pattern makes sense when you can trace it back honestly, but explanation isn't exoneration. Understanding is not permission. Pain does not make you innocent forever. At some point, a man has to look at the pattern and say, I didn't choose how this started, but I am responsible for whether it continues. And that's the dividing line. That's where formation becomes governance, where the boy stops explaining and the man starts correcting. Being understood is not the same as being governed. Being seen is not the same as being corrected. Being wounded isn't the same as being exempt. Being able to explain the pattern is not the same as breaking it. So yes, I honor the boy. I honor what happened before he had defense. I honor what got in before he had language. I honor the confusion, the grief, but I will not help the man build a throne for that wound. You do not get to make your damaged king. You do not get to make your appetite the law. You do not get to keep handing the steering wheel to something that never loved you, never protected you, never built you, and never had to pay the consequences for what it made you become. You are responsible now. That may sound harsh. Good. It should. But it's also mercy. Because if you are responsible now, then you are not helpless. If you are responsible now, then you can move. If you are responsible now, then you can correct now. And if you can correct now, then the past may explain you, but it does not own you. Now, before I get to the motorcycle, I want you to consider something. Imagine a photojournalist is following you around all day, every day. Not just when you are performing, not just when you are polished, not just when you are being generous in public, all day, everything you say, everything you do, every text you send, every look on your face, every little eye roll, the way you say, oh, I'm so excited to see you when your body is telling the truth and your mouth is lying. The way you feign interest, the way you treat people in the comments, the way you talk about people after you hang up, the way you move when no one is praising you, the way you spend the first energy of the day, how you handle your appetite, the way you handle boredom, being corrected, being told no, the way you treat the person who cannot do anything for you, the way you treat the person who can, all of it. Not just the bad, the good too. The real service, the quiet restraint, the apology nobody saw, the message you didn't send, the meal you made, the mile you walked, the truth you told, the pattern you interrupted, the discipline you repeated when nobody clapped. The photojournalist catches all of it: the performance, the serenity, the contradiction, the repair, the avoidance, the whole record. Then, imagine everything they document becomes front page news. And everyone you care about has a subscription: the people you love, the people you admire, the people you aspire to become, the people who look up to you, the people you've been avoiding, people who know what you keep explaining. And all of them are very interested in reading what this says. Would that change how you govern yourself throughout the day? Would it change what you call harmless? What you keep calling private? What you keep calling not that serious? Would it change how quickly you corrected the signal? Do you see this? The issue is not that the world needs to follow you with a camera. The issue is that your life is already producing a record. Your body keeps one. Your relationships keep one. Your habits, your house, your search history keeps one. Your bank account keeps one. Your tone, your repeated choices, your consequences. The machine keeps receipts. The question is not whether there is a record. The question is whether you are willing to read it before it becomes consequence. When I say machine, I mean more than the motorcycle. The motorcycle is the image, the thing you can hear, feel, ride, clean, polish, neglect, repair, and crash. But the machine's bigger than that. The body is a machine. Habits are a machine. Recovery can become a machine. A household is a machine. A courtroom. Insurance is a machine. Industry. Religion can become a machine. Culture, society, institutions, algorithms. And a lot of those algorithms are not designed to keep you engaged. They are designed to keep you distracted. A machine can serve you. A machine can carry you, can test you, can shape you. A machine can use you. A machine can deform you. And a man has to learn the difference between riding the machine and being used by the machine, and governing himself inside the machine. Riding the machine can be passive. You're just on a bike. Maybe it's leisure. Maybe it's transportation. Maybe it's just a ride. Being used by the machine is different. Then you're a pawn in somebody else's battle, their hustle, a slave to your own misery and attachments. A man being fed into a system that doesn't care whether he becomes more governed, more honest, more whole, or more useful. But governing yourself inside the machine means you are aware, alert, not paranoid, not anxious, not frantic, prepared, preparing, watching for alignment, watching for the signal, watching for the moment the machine stops serving the man and starts consuming him, because the machine will always produce pressure. The question is whether the man produces governance. A man loves his motorcycle. And I mean loves it. Not likes it, not uses it, loves it. He likes walking up to it. Likes sitting on it. Likes the way it feels under him. Likes the rumble at a stoplight. Likes driving past big mirrored windows and catching a glimpse of himself on it. He likes the wind. Maybe not in his ears so much, because then they start ringing. And if you ride, you know exactly what I mean. He likes the way people understand not to touch it, and that's a real thing. You get off a bike in a parking lot. Most people know the code. They don't touch it. They don't lean on it. They don't sit on it. They don't even really get close to it unless they are invited. Not because you are some scary, violent man. It's because there's a code. There's respect around the machine. And if a motorcycle is different from a car can be transportation. Car can be a project. It can be your baby. And all of those things can be a motorcycle too. A car can be beautiful. But a motorcycle brings exposure. You're not inside the machine. You're on it. Your body is part of the experience. Your hands, your feet, your knees, your hips, your spine, your chest, your breath. You feel the machine. You feel the road. You feel the weather. You feel the mistake faster. A motorcycle represents freedom, but freedom with thinner margins. That's why it works here, because a motorcycle doesn't just move your body. It moves your soul. Now, I learned a version of that from a motorcycle salesman I worked with. He would tell people 4 wheels moves your body, but 2 wheels moves your soul. And I have to be honest, that might have been one of the truest thing I ever heard him say. And that's complicated because I learned that line from a place that also hurt me. I learned it inside a machine that gave me real things and also did real damage. And that matters because correction requires accurate truth, not flattering truth, not grievance truth, not the version where everything that hurt me must now be poison in retrospect. It was not all poison, and that's hard to say, but it's true. Some of it was real. Passion for bikes was real. The customers were real. Some of the friendships were real. Some of the advice was real. Some of the hope was real. Some of the feeling of, man, this could really go somewhere was real. Betrayal does not mean everything attached to the place was fake. Sometimes that is why betrayal hurts, because some of it was real. And that's correction. Are you here? Do you see the correction here? Grievance wants to poison the whole record. Evidence does not allow that. The uncorrected version wants to flatten the whole thing. They hurt me, so it was all fake. They betrayed me, so nothing good came from there. They failed me, so everyone involved was always full of shit. That might feel powerful. It might feel protective. It might feel clean, but it's not accurate. And Reforged cannot be built on inaccurate truth. Evidence over narrative means I do not get to turn pain into a license to distort the record. It was not all poison. And that doesn't excuse what was poison. That doesn't minimize it. It doesn't make the betrayal okay. It just means correction requires me to tell the truth with precision, even when a simpler story would feel better. Because the machine does not care about my simpler story. The point is not only that the machine speaks, the point is what a man does after he hears it. Once the signal is heard, explanation changes roles. Before the signal, explanation can help locate the problem. After the signal, explanation can become delay. A man hears the sound, feels the wobble, notices the hesitation, something is off. And then he says, I'll get to it. Sometimes that is honest. Sometimes timing really matters. Sometimes he needs money, tools, help, information, or the right window to make the repair. But a lot of the time, I'll get to it means I hope I never have to address this. It sounds responsible. It sounds like a plan. Sometimes it's just a prayer that consequence stays patient. Consequence is not always patient. And there's that louder version. I'll run it hard until the wheels fall off. Sometimes that's noble. Sometimes that is survival. Sometimes you only have one machine, and there are no good options. Sometimes the choices are not good and bad. They are bad and worse. And when all you have is one bike, no money, no tools, no time, no access, and no clean alternative, then maybe you ride that motherfucker as far as it will take you. You choose the best bad option, and you ride hard. And when the wheels fall off, you work with what's left. That can be grit. That can be survival. That can be necessary. But sometimes, until the wheels fall off, is bullshit. Sometimes the machine has so much life left in it. Sometimes the signal is still correctable. Sometimes stopping would be inconvenient, not impossible. Sometimes the man could inspect it, ask for help, use the tools, pay attention. Maybe he could correct the problem before it becomes failure. Maybe he doesn't want help. Maybe he doesn't want to lose the season. He doesn't want to admit the machine is compromised. He doesn't want the humility of repair. So he turns neglect into personality. He turns delay into grit. He turns avoidable collapse into a soundtrack. And then, when the wheels finally come off, he gets to say, see, I rode hard. No. Maybe you just refused correction. A corrected man does not wait for the wheels to fall off so he can prove how hard he was riding. If you can hear the signal, you are already responsible for the signal. Now, this is where we have to get precise because I was using the word maintenance too loosely. Waxing the tank isn't maintenance. Running a shoestring around the spokes so the wheels shine is not maintenance. Wiping chrome, keeping it clean, making it look respected, none of that's maintenance. That's polish. Polish says, notice me. Polish isn't evil. There's nothing wrong with shine, with pride. There's nothing wrong with a clean machine. There's nothing wrong with presentation. There's nothing wrong with wanting the thing you love to look loved. But polish becomes a lie when it covers an ignored signal. Maintenance is different. Maintenance is brakes, tires, bearings, fluids, belt, chain, alignment, forks, bolts, inspection, regular responsibility before failure. Maintenance says, I am reliable. Then there is correction. Correction is when the maintenance starts to fail and action is taken. Correction is response to signal. Correction says, before we go anywhere, before we do anything, let's make sure this is safe. Or in Reforged language, polish says, notice me. Maintenance says, I am reliable. Correction says, welcome to the forge. Because correction is where the heat starts. Correction is not the part where everybody claps. It's not the shiny part. Correction is not the dramatic speech. It's not the post about accountability. Correction is the part where the man stops writing, gets off the machine, admits the sound is real, examines what is failing, asks for help if he is not the mechanic, and accepts the inconvenience of repair before the consequence becomes more expensive. Correction may cost you the season, but neglect may cost you the machine. And that's the difference. Now translate that into a man. A haircut, fit body, nice clothes, a flex car, clean social media presence, all of that can be polished. Sharp language, a good apology, trauma vocabulary, a podcast playlist can be polished. Even self-improvement can become polished. And none of those things are automatically fake. A fit body can testify. It can. The body can become evidence. A fit body can also distract. If training is the only corrected part of the man, the machine is still compromised. A man can have abs and still lie. He can eat clean and still be cruel. He can read books after books after books and refuse repair. A man can know every term for his trauma and still weaponize his wound. A man can apologize beautifully and still never change a damn thing. An apology without correction is just polish on the damage. I'm working on myself becomes polish when there is no evidence of actual work. Maintenance in a man looks like discernment, internal governance, examination, regular honesty, sleep, food, routine, order. Not because the routine makes him morally superior, but because maintenance is the only discipline that keeps correction from becoming a catastrophe. And correction? Only he can define the correction, but define it he must. You understand this? Because I cannot hand every man a universal repair list and call that reforged. The correction depends on the signal. For one man, correction is sending the message. For another, correction is not sending the message. For one man, correction is going to the gym. For another, correction is resting because his obsession with training has become another hiding place. For one man, correction might be speaking up. For another, correction is just shutting up because he has been using speech as a weapon. Maybe correction is leaving. Maybe correction is staying, finally doing the work. But only he can define the correction. Define it he must. Because vagueness is where the old pattern hides. And this is where shame enters. Where a man is corrected and immediately feels shame. Sometimes what is happening is simple. He is recognizing his failure to act on what he has known for some time. That's the sting. The signal was already there. He heard it. He delayed. He said, I'll get to it. Then someone else heard the sound. Now it feels a little like humiliation, but correction is not humiliation. Correction becomes humiliation when pride refuses humility. If every correction feels like humiliation, a man will defend the hiding place instead of correcting the pattern. And some men are not defending the behavior. They're defending the hiding place. They're defending the place where chaos feels safe and debauchery seems serene. They're defending the place where nobody asks them to become different. They're defending the illusion that delay is still control. And explanation can become defense. Paint, boards, Privacy screens. A man can build a whole fence out of accurate facts. He can paint it with trauma language, board it up with context, cover it with sincerity, decorate it with recovery phrases, hang a fucking sign on it that says, I'm working on myself. And behind that fence, the same machine keeps making the same sound. Are you still with me here? Because this is where self-awareness becomes dangerous. A man can build a fence out of true facts. Explanation is not the enemy. Explanation can locate the signal. It can name the wound. It can trace the pattern. Explanation can show where the damage started. Explanation can help the man understand why the reaction has so much voltage, but explanation becomes a problem when it asks to be treated like repair. The story is not the evidence. The evidence is what the story has to answer to. A man can explain the sound all day. The machine still needs corrected. It's not just motorcycles. Machines don't care how sincere your explanation is. Mechanics don't consider explanations, let alone defer to them. You can tell the mechanic why you ignored the sound. You explained how busy you are. You can explain that you meant to get to it, that it really meant a lot to you. You can explain your childhood, your stress, your financial pressure. You can explain that nobody understands how hard things have been. Fine. The mechanic may be compassionate. The mechanic may care. He may nod. But the machine still has to be inspected. The loose bolt doesn't tighten because your explanation was sincere. That brake line doesn't heal because you had a good reason. The bearing doesn't care about your trauma response. The signal has to be answered. That is true in systems too. In another part of my life right now, I'm dealing with an insurance process. And I don't bring that up to tell the story. That's not this episode. I bring it up because it proves the point. Some machines do not respond to outrage. They don't respond to moral certainty. They do not respond because I know I'm right. They respond to documentation, leverage, procedure, deadlines, exposure, records, pressure applied at the correct point. That's the lesson. Correction is not always emotional. Sometimes correction is mechanical. You stop explaining why the warning light should not be there. And you inspect the system. You name the failure. You gather the evidence. You apply pressure at the correct point. Because ignoring the signal does not protect you from consequence. It just guarantees the machine breaks harder. Documentation remembers accurately. Emotion remembers intensely. Documentation remembers accurately. Precision gets the most accurate diagnosis. Pressure applied at the wrong place is just noise with effort behind it. Yelling, pleading, over-texting, arguing with the wrong person, posting instead of filing, venting instead of documenting, trying to force emotional agreement, confusing audience with authority, mistaking noise for leverage, but that's not correction. Procedure is submission to structure where there used to be defiance and chaos. And I know some men hate that. I know some men hear procedure and immediately feel controlled. They hear deadline and feel resentment. They hear documentation and feel like somebody is making them small. But sometimes the correction is not dramatic. Sometimes correction is just filing the form correctly, keeping the record, reading the rules, being on time. Sometimes correction is not giving the machine a reason to dismiss you. Explanation says this should not be happening. Correction says this ends now. Sometimes the machine that speaks first is your body. Before the mind admits something is wrong, the body already knows. Heat, heart rate, breath, tremors, dizziness, tension, that inner buzzing, that sense that something is moving faster than your governance. The body often tells the truth before the explanation is ready. And mental drift has its own signals too: obsession, rumination, justification, negotiation. Rumination is not always reflection. Sometimes it's the mind circling the same excuse until it sounds reasonable. Attachment to outcomes can deform a man. He organizes his life around the thing: person, the appetite, the answer, the result, the apology, the relationship, the settlement, the attention, the text back, the approval, and he shrinks to nothing. Wanting something is not the same as being attached to it. Wanting still leaves you free. Attachment starts negotiating your freedom. A man can want something and still be okay if reality says no. A man can desire something and still move on long before the desire appears. That's governance. But if he cannot release the outcome, he becomes unreachable, irrational, illogical, hostile. And I do not necessarily mean aggressive or violent. Hostile can mean unreachable. Hostile can mean no correction can get in. It can mean reality is now an enemy because it didn't produce the outcome he demanded. The signal is not the enemy. The signal is the first step of the path towards serenity. Stop, sit, breathe, examine. That's correction sometimes. Not a speech, not a post, not an announcement. Stop, sit, breathe, examine. When the body gives the signal, stop. When the mind starts drifting, stop. When attachment becomes obsession, stop. When the outcome starts governing the man, stop. Communication, patience, clarity seeking, reality contact. That's correction. Correction doesn't mean a man becomes harmless. That is not reforged. The goal is not to become harmless. Harmless is not correction. Harmless can be erasure. A man should not be trying to delete his force. He should not be trying to neuter his aggression, his sexuality, his intensity, his charm, his intelligence, his language, his ambition, his physicality, his presence, his mental fortitude, his capacity for love, his softness. His aggression and his softness both have to stay. The goal is not to become less of a man. The goal is to become governed. Dangerous is capacity. Threat is intent. Those are not the same thing. A dangerous man has capacity. He can affect systems. He can apply pressure. He can expose weakness. He can move people. He can challenge a machine. He can influence men. He can do damage. And damage is not always negative. Sometimes institutions need to be harmed. Sometimes lies need to be harmed. Old patterns, chaos needs to be interrupted. Sometimes a man has to be capable of consequence. That is danger. But a threat is different. A threat carries ill will. A threat wants harm for its own sake. A threat wants domination, wants revenge more than repair. A threat wants control more than correction. And not every dangerous man is a threat. Not every threat is dangerous. Some threats are just weak. A governed, dangerous man does not become smaller. He becomes ordered. Aggression becomes protection. Strength becomes service. Sexuality becomes intimacy under restraint instead of appetite on an altar. Charm becomes warmth instead of manipulation. Intelligence becomes discernment rather than evasion. Language becomes precision instead of fog. Ambition becomes construction instead of conquest. Presence becomes steadiness instead of intimidation. And a man can be smart enough to withhold just enough truth to make someone believe something completely false. That's intelligence without honesty. That's evasion. A man can be charming enough to make people feel safe when he hides the cost. That's manipulation. A man can have the sexuality that becomes the pinnacle, the shrine, the altar. That is appetite religion. A man can have aggression that leaks everywhere, and that's not strength, that's poor contamination. You see the line here? Dangerous is the capacity. Threat is the intent. Correction does not erase the man, it governs him. Correction does not remove the edge, it governs the hand. A sheathed sword is still a sword. A battle axe is just as capable of damage no matter whose hand it is in. The question is not whether the axe can cause harm. The question is what governs the hand holding it. Correction does not make a dangerous man harmless. It makes him governed. Still dangerous, no longer a threat. Now, a motorcycle is not trustworthy because it looks good in the driveway. It is proven under speed, under braking, under lean, under heat, under load, under vibration, under imperfect road conditions. That's where the truth shows up. And a man is not trustworthy because he can explain himself when calm. Calm is the driveway. I want to know what happens under speed, man. Emotional speed, sexual speed, anger speed, rejection speed, embarrassment, financial pressure, praise, freedom. Because speed is not just literal speed. Speed is what happens when pressure arrives faster than an uncorrected man can govern himself. Speed is when emotion, opportunity, Appetite, fear, shame, or pressure accelerate before governance catches up. A man is trustworthy under speed when he has enough mental fortitude to make a correct decision in a split second. Not necessarily the popular decision, not necessarily the decision everybody's going to agree with, not necessarily the prettiest decision, but the decision that serves the best interest of what is actually at hand. Under emotional speed, an uncorrected man jumps to conclusions. He takes it the wrong way, lets interpretation outrun evidence. He overreacts. He treats the first feeling like command. A corrected man may still feel the reaction in his body, but he does not let the reaction drive the machine. If he moves, he acts. He does not merely react. Sexual speed is when attraction, fantasy, appetite, novelty, attention, or opportunity accelerate before governance catches up. It's not attraction itself. It's not masculinity itself. It's not desire itself. It is attraction plus acceleration. The body says yes before the man has examined what yes would cost. And sometimes desire gets vocabulary. Sometimes fantasy finds a costume. Somebody watches a movie, reads a book, sees appetite with better lighting, and suddenly wants to call it a lifestyle. No, you are not automatically initiated into something deep because your fantasy found a uniform. Intensity is not intimacy. Control is not automatically trust. Novelty is not depth. Fantasy with vocabulary is still fantasy if it is not governed. A corrected man does not become sexless. He becomes governed. He notices the acceleration, slows the machine, examines the appetite, checks the alignment, protects his commitments. He refuses to let appetite make decisions for the man. Anger speed is when insults, shame, threat, embarrassment, or frustration accelerate into reaction before discernment arrives. An uncorrected man threatens, he punishes, escalates, dominates, humiliates, withdraws cruelly, tries to win. A corrected man pauses. He names what is happening, chooses proportion, protects what needs protecting, refuses to let anger drive the machine. And that is trustworthy under speed. Not no emotion, not no desire, not no anger. God knows I'm full of all of that. Governance under speed. Because pressure reveals whether correction is real or whether the man has only become more articulate. Now stay with me here, because some people will hear this and think the answer is always action. It's not. Not every movement is correction. Some movement is anxiety wearing boots. Sometimes action is correction. It's avoidance. It is discomfort discharge. Some men move because movement is required. Some men move because stillness exposes them. And if you cannot be still when stillness is required, your movement is not freedom. It is obedience to pressure. There is a certain kind of driver at a red light. The light is red, the car is stopped, the instruction is not complicated. Stop, but he cannot. He lets off the brake and inches forward, stops, inches forward again, stops, inches forward again. He has not changed the light. He is not meaningfully closer to where he is going. He has not solved traffic. He has only revealed that stillness confronts him. Pay attention when you're out driving. That's not a driving problem. That's a formation problem. Still means still until the light changes. And I'm not going to build the whole red light episode here. That belongs somewhere else. But the principle belongs here. Correction sometimes starts with taking your hand off the throttle, not sending the text that can be corrected, not explaining one more time can be correction. Not escalating can be correction. Silence, waiting, breathing, letting the machine cool before you touch it can be correction. Restraint is not cowardice. Passivity is refusing to participate. Restraint is participating under governance. A corrected man does not worship action. He obeys timing. When the signal says stop, he stops. When the signal says inspect, he inspects. When the signal says move, he moves. And when the light changes, he does not sit there forever pretending patience is a virtue. He moves clean, be decisive, make mistakes, own the decision, and correct. But do not mistake twitching for a decision. Now bring it back to yourself. Not the guy you're thinking about. Not the man who needs to hear this. You. What signal are you explaining? What would the front page say? If the record of your day was published honestly, what would it show? Where are you polished but not reliable? Where are you reliable but not correcting? Where are you using explanation as a fence? Where are you calling motion correction? Where are you calling appetite freedom? Where are you saying, I'll get to it? Where are you planning to ride until the wheels fall off, even though correction is available? This leaves us with one correction, not the whole life, not every pattern, not every wound, not every machine, one correction. Because if a man tries to correct everything at once, sometimes that is just another way to avoid correcting anything specifically at all. Vagueness is where the old pattern hides. So pick one signal. One. Not the one that makes you look deep. Not the one that will sound impressive. Not the one that will make a good point. Not one that is actually making noise. Maybe it is your body. Maybe it is your anger, your lust, your resentment, your money. Maybe it's your room. Maybe it is your relationship. Maybe it's that message you need to send. Maybe it's the message you need to stop sending. Maybe it's the appointment, the paperwork. Maybe it's the apology without the performance. Maybe it's documentation. Maybe it's deleting an old contact, eating correctly. Maybe it's going to train. Maybe it's just sitting down and breathing before you turn one more feeling into one more consequence. Maybe it is admitting the signal, not explaining it, admitting it. Polish says, notice me. Maintenance says, I am reliable. Correction says, welcome to the forge. So welcome to the forge. Choose one area of your life to start correcting today. Not understanding, not explaining, not polishing, correcting. Before this day is over, identify one signal you have been explaining and make one correction that answers it. Because if you can hear the signal, you are already responsible for the signal. And if you keep riding it until the wheels fall off, when correction was available, don't call that grit, call it what it is. My failures are not evidence that nobody is perfect. That is too small. That lets the room exhale too soon. My failures are evidence that correction is possible. That responsibility can be survived. That a man can stop asking his story to protect him from the work his life is demanding. The boy can explain the pain. The man has to correct what the pain becomes. The machine doesn't care how beautiful the explanation is. It either gets corrected or it fails. Same material, different output. This is Reforged. Ignore the anecdotes.